All right, 3. Welcome, guys. It's another week and another episode of Old School, New School. I'm still not comfortable being new school, but I'm Jude Allume. This is Wil Masisak. This week, we're going to be talking a little bit about the franchise tag. A lot of tags have gone out so far. A little bit on some maybe surprising releases. And of course, we're going to touch the NFL draft as we've been doing for the last several weeks. This week, we're going to talk about the most important position in all of football. I don't know how we waited so long to talk about it, but we're going to get into some quarterbacks today. Let's start off with franchise tags. Anyone who got tagged that you weren't necessarily sure was going to get the tag or surprised you maybe?
Well, I think surprised me. I don't know. I feel like, Marcus May, the safety tagged by the Jets. It's like, I don't know, the Jets, you have endless amount of money. So I guess, maybe you could franchise tag a guy just to see what you really think about him for another year. And I like the franchise tag of Chris Godwin in Tampa Bay. I understand that one because, Tom Brady and Gronkowski are essentially a 1 year at a time contract kind of people. So why not keep Chris Godwin around for another year and have a shot at making another run with kind of the entire team that you had last year. So I kind of get those. For you, I know that you found one of them mystifying.
Yeah, just with the Bears and still a question mark at the QB position as far as are they going to commit to Mitchell Trubisky or not. So for me, it just doesn't quite make sense as far as giving Allen Robinson the franchise tag. That's no slight to Allen Robinson whatsoever. He's a hell of a receiver. But giving him top dollar to come back for another year and play with Mitchell Trubisky just doesn't seem like, the greatest thing to do right now. Just because Mitchell Trubisky just isn't the greatest quarterback right now for the Bears. I don't know if maybe this is a sign of things to come. Maybe they're going to go out and get that different quarterback. And, that'll make Allen Robinson all the more appealing for whoever it is maybe trying to go out and get. But for right now, if you're planning to go forward with Mitchell Trubisky, I'm not trying to spend top dollars on a quarterback because we're not expecting Trubisky to just go out there and fling the ball all over the place. We're going to play some great defense and pound the ball as much as we can. So I didn't really like that one. I disagree with you on Marcus May, though. I feel like he started every game for the Jets. He really stepped up this season after they traded Jamal Adams, and he was kind of like the heartbeat of that defense. He was a very vocal leader on that defense, so I kind of like them keeping him around. I'm not 100% sure if the numbers will back it up as far as like him producing as a top-tier safety, but I definitely like him on the Jets, and I like, they give him a 1 year and try to figure out a way to keep him around long-term because he's vital to that defense.
Yeah, no, not to say he's not a good player or important. It's just, the price they're paying, they're overpaying on purpose because, nobody really wants to sign with the Jets, I'm sure, right? At least not right now. Maybe after they draft a quarterback and number 2 that people think is exciting, they might be a little bit more into it. But I imagine that the start of free agency, it's going to be a tough sell because there's a lot of unknowns there and you don't really know if that coaching group is going to stick around long enough, to really turn a team around. That's what I would say about that. I don't know. I think that in general that the franchise tag, this year it seems like instead of being used for like, oh my God, this great player is going to be gone if we don't franchise tag him, which is what I think originally that was the idea of the franchise tag. Instead, it's like they use it strategically now, to try to keep somebody available to negotiate next year instead of this year, or because they're still trying to figure out if they want to keep him long-term or not, or just, as I said before, stick around with us for a year, even though you don't really want to, because we think we're going to be better by the time that you are renegotiating next year. So it just seems like a strategic thing instead of, especially this year where when you do a franchise tag, you have to use all the money in this year's cap space. So right away you have half the teams in the league because of the cap coming down didn't really have any cap space, and that made them reluctant or even unable to use a franchise tag. So it's a strategic move for teams that have cap space. Good for them. Historically, I'm not really sure how well it's worked out for for anybody. That would be an interesting study to see if it was, if it really paid to franchise tag a player.
I don't know. I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head where it's like, yeah, I know Kirk Cousins, I know was probably a guy who for like 3 years in a row, he got franchise tagged. I don't know if that was a success story because ultimately he goes to a different team and the Redskins didn't really make it far. I don't even know if they made it to the playoffs during those 3 years that Cousins got the tag, but that's the only example coming to mind right now for me.
Yeah, I think about it from the Steelers' standpoint. They tagged Bud Dupree last year, and it seemed to me at the time they would have been way better off just making a deal with Bud Dupree that was, careful about the salary cap hit that they had in the coming years. Spread out that signing bonus part of it over several years instead of using the entire cap hit last year. They'd be in a lot better cap situation this year and would still have Bud Dupree going off into the future if they hadn't franchise tagged him last year. So it just feels like they could have made a deal with him and saved $14 million against the cap in 2021, which seems like it would have been a better choice than losing him, which is probably what's going to happen now. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Gotcha. Another casualty of the cap coming down is, for me, there's at least one surprise cut as a result of the cap coming down. Any surprise cuts for you?
Well, I hope it's not the same one that you're thinking of. Emmanuel Sanders, wide receiver with New Orleans Saints, is one that I feel like, he wasn't necessarily a great fit in New Orleans, but I still feel like that's a team that they've got problems. They have salary cap problems. They don't have any draft picks. Their quarterback, we don't know if he's coming back or not. It seems like he isn't. And even if they, are satisfied to play, a quarterback that most people would think of as being a gadget or, the fluke kind of a quarterback, even if they are satisfied that he's their number one guy, he's now 30 something. I mean, it's like they're not really in a good situation there. So I understand why they can cut good players, but they see themselves as a contender. So for a contender to have to make salary cap casualty cuts hurts. How about you? What's the one that you were surprised about?
I was a little shocked by Kevin Zietler getting cut by the Giants 2 years ago. Unfortunately, I have the memory is still fresh in my head. That Giants offensive line was atrocious, and they made the deal, got rid of Beckham. They got Zietler. I don't know if he came on the Beckham deal. He might have came on a Olivia Vernon deal. Nonetheless, he came to the Giants, and it kind of helped the Giants start on the path. They're not a great line, but they're way ahead of where they were 2 years ago. And it was definitely started by them getting Zietler, who was, playing guard for them. And he was kind of just helping the younger guys and, provided them with a little bit of tutelage. And over time, the Giants line wasn't so terrible. It's not great. Still, I need to stress that, but it's definitely way better than it was before. So for him to get cut, it was a little bit surprising to me because it's not a huge figure. He was due to make, I believe, $11 million. It's not a ginormous amount of money. I didn't expect that they would cut him just to save it. I mean, yes, it was 11 million, and by cutting him, they saved 12 million. I'm not going to get into the intricacies of how that works, but it just didn't see that one coming, and that was a guy that was really helpful to them. Not sure what they're going to do to fill that gap now.
I think they look at this draft and see about a zillion offensive linemen, especially offensive linemen who are good run blockers. I have a feeling the Giants are going to go old school with how they build their team, and they'll start the year in 2021 with a very young offensive line with a lot of run blocking talent, a very young running back with a lot of talent, and a relatively young and cheap quarterback. It's I feel like that's the nucleus that they'll use to build that offense, and then you've got.
It's a very Dave Gettleman-esque type.
Yes, exactly. That's what they like to do. And if they'll have money to spend, in theory, if they want to add pieces to that to try to make it, to fill in what they don't do in the draft, they do have some money, especially if they use that, extra 10 million or so they get getting rid of Zietler. So
you got money, but are you going to use money on a lineman? Because Zietler, he's a really good lineman. If you wanted to spend, you would have spent on him. As far as using your picks on linemen, I get that, but we've seen it before. Even as with the Giants, we've seen it. Drafting a guy high doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pan out. Look how long they took with Eric Flowers, and that was just a debacle. And he was just never good for them. Even when they moved him over to right tackle, he got a little bit better, but still not good enough for them to say, yeah, we're going to keep you around long term. And they gladly just let him walk away. But, we'll see. David Gettleman, that is his MO. He likes to draft big boys, defensive and offensive.
Well, here's the thing, though, about the Giants. When you build your team around a running back, especially a running back that you took, what was he, 1, 2? What did he go in the draft?
He was 2.
Yeah, something like that. You are basically sentencing yourself to mediocrity for a really long time in NFL terms. Because even if you have the best running back in the world, which maybe they do right now if he's healthy, it's not really the way that you're going to win Super Bowls. I think it's just think about what Gettleman is trying to do as being good enough to not get fired. Like that's sort of the level that they're, be consistently
aiming for mediocrity.
Yes. Because that's how they're built. If you don't swing for the fences in the draft and go after, quarterbacks and really dynamic players at more valuable positions than running back, then, you're sentencing yourself to a very hard road to get past mediocrity is what I would say. Tom.
It's crazy. Reports are coming out. They're not ready to commit to Saquon, even though your team is built to run through Saquon. But the injury concerns are giving you second thoughts. So looks like another messy situation for the Giants.
What else is new?
What else is new? Let's get to some draft talk, huh? Quarterbacks. We've got a lot of quarterbacks in this draft. More quarterbacks than
we don't have a lot of good quarterbacks in this draft. We got a lot of quarterbacks.
Talking about, yeah. But
I was just going to say, Jude, I have a feeling that we're going to have the same guys. Our top 5 or 6 is going to be the same, but our order is going to be different. I think we've been mostly agreeing, on the guys at the top in the other position groups. But I think
not sure, but I think we disagreed at the top, or maybe we just disagreed of the value of the guy I have on top. I don't know.
For which group? For quarterback?
Quarterbacks, yeah.
Well, let's talk about it. So first off, let's talk Trevor Lawrence. So I think do you have in your mind a top 5?
My mind a top 5.
He's one for you in your top 5.
Yeah. I guess Wilson is 2. And then Lance at 3.
Okay, so here's the thing. For me, I just listened to Chris Sims today, and Chris Sims caught a lot of flack this week because his quarterback rankings are very different from virtually everyone else. And this, first of all, it leads me to a bigger subject in general we can talk about another time, which is that I don't understand how you can have 25 major analysts and former scouts and everything else, and yet the top 25 or 50 guys they have is all the same. Like, in other words, is there not, is it so like formulated scouting that everyone thinks Micah Parsons is, the best linebacker in the country? Like, yes, he's a good player, and yeah, you can debate the merits or whatever, but it's like no one is willing to come out and say they don't like him or they like another player better or whatever. It just feels like they're looking at what everyone else is doing and saying about the list and going, oh yeah, well, yeah, I can see why they have that guy at the top. I have that guy at the top too. When it comes to college quarterbacks, though, this is really messed up because there's a drastic difference between being a good college quarterback or even a great college quarterback and being a great NFL quarterback. So right away, I'm judging, and I'm just being clear about what my method is here. I'm judging quarterbacks on whether they can be a great NFL quarterback. So the best prospect to me is one that I think is surefire, ready to be a great NFL quarterback. And the next level is I think he's going to be a great quarterback once he gets it together. And then the third level is has a chance to be a great quarterback. But I'm like, if you tell me a guy is, oh, this guy's going to be a solid pro, I'm not interested in drafting that guy. Like, I think there's plenty of quarterbacks kicking around who can be your backup quarterback, spot starter, available on the market at any time for on the cheap. So I'm swinging for the fences with quarterbacks. Therefore, I like Trevor Lawrence. His skills, his ability to throw the ball against air, and like what his skill set is fantastic to look at. It's beautiful. Like, he's a pretty player. I'm not at all convinced that he is ready to be an NFL quarterback right now. to just step in, especially on a team that, I mean, he's got a good thing going to Jacksonville in that they got a good running game there and they have built a young offensive line. But I'm not sure he's ready to be the guy to make plays with his arm and win tough football games. So I think they'll be respectable immediately. I don't think he's going to be terrible, but I think there's going to be a curve with him. I think Zach Wilson is more ready to be an NFL quarterback. He may not have the ceiling that Trevor Lawrence would have if Trevor Lawrence really becomes an excellent quarterback in addition to being a great thrower. But I think Zach Wilson could come even on a bad team and kind of change the culture. And a lot of that has to do with he just seems like a really he's willing to make plays that have risk attached to them. And that to me is that's something that you can't teach an NFL quarterback. So right away, not that I'm saying anything really bad about Trevor Lawrence. I just don't have him at that level of being just to step in and immediately be successful. So tell me why you think Trevor Lawrence can be successful like that, or if you agree.
So what we can do with Lawrence is evaluate what we've seen, his career, the accolades, the numbers, the championships. It's all there. So what we can do is just evaluate what we've seen. He's got the arm talent. He can make every throw. What you're saying, I believe, is just we don't know if it's going to translate to the next level and if he's got it in between the ears to kind of help his game be as prolific as it was in college. And I feel like that's where you and pretty much every other scout is going to differ. Because guys are going to look and say, well, he can throw, he's athletic, he can run, he can do everything, he can make every throw. So everything is there. And you're just telling me I need to coach him up on how to read an NFL defense, how to, go through my progressions as far as when I'm looking to throw the ball. Any coach is going to say, you know what, I'll take that, because every coach is going to be like, I can coach you to that point where we can take the tools that you already have and just sharpen them and make you the best possible player you can be. And in that case, I think Lawrence is absolutely the best guy. He's the most talented. He's got the best arm. And I think another thing is people who kind of see him like you do, he kind of gets that because he was on such a good team. So for him, he didn't have to play from behind. He didn't have to take a lot of chances. It was a lot of wide open throws because he played with a lot of great players. And I would not want to, take away from a guy's game just because he played with other good players.
Well, we'll see how you feel about Mac Jones because it's even more that situation.
I like that.
Yeah. I mean, all I'm saying is, it's like I don't mean to nitpick the guy, but he's going to go first overall, so I can nitpick him a little bit. As talking about Trevor Lawrence, the secondary accuracy, not having to wait to see a guy open to throw it, when it gets sped up against better opponents who put pressure on him, there was some stuff that I didn't like about what he did. And here's the thing about Clemson. People talk about level of competition for BYU, which admittedly is not that great. But the ACC, other than Clemson, maybe each year they have one other team that's pretty good. And the rest of the competition in that conference is not particularly good. Like you see the real Trevor Lawrence more like he's going to look at in the NFL in the playoffs. And in the playoffs, he's had some good games. He basically won a game with his legs. But in the other playoff games, I think he had some issues with what I'm talking about. They got a little bit faster and he sped up maybe a little bit too much in terms of what he was trying to do and got a little anxious in the pocket. That's not to say that he'll always be that way or he can't be better, but my experience is that quarterbacks either show that ability to just not even notice what's going on and work the pocket and work the field without worrying about that pressure. And then some other guys just wilt when it happens. And he's not a wilter, but it's concerning to be the number one. Andrew Luck did not look like that under pressure. Andrew Luck played better whenever a guy was in his face and they were playing against a team that had a great pass rush. So that's all I'm saying. I don't think he's the best quarterback prospect that we've had in decades. I don't buy that. I saw Patrick Mahomes on tape in college for 15 minutes and thought, we've forgotten what great quarterbacks look like. This is a future Hall of Fame quarterback because of just that ability when everything's going wrong around him, especially on a team that wasn't all that great. He was in trouble, running around, finds a guy, and you're like, oh my God, don't throw that. And then he throws a perfect ball to somebody on the other side of the field. that's not Trevor Lawrence. That's not Trevor Lawrence's game. Zach Wilson doesn't have that talent, but he has that ability. He thinks he can make that throw. Go ahead.
We don't know. We can't say that he can't do it either. We just never seen him in that position where he needed to do it. There just haven't been many games where it was like, okay, Trevor, we need you to carry us back into this game, to bring us back into this game. It just wasn't what Clemson was. They were a team that was usually, putting their foot on the throats of other teams. So sure. I can't fault him for not being a guy. Like, who knows if he – basically, we don't know. He can do it. He has the tools to do it. He's still going to be the top guy for me and pretty much for everybody else. He's definitely going number one. If he doesn't, I know the Jets would be quite happy at the very least.
Sure. Well, I think both have a chance to be good NFL quarterbacks, maybe even great NFL quarterbacks someday. It's just that translation for quarterbacks, translation from college to pro game is like no other position on earth. It's being quarterback in the NFL is like the hardest job there is. Just you're going to hire a guy, or you think you've auditioned and you think is the right guy, but you're not going to know until he plays a couple of years. No matter what. You said Trey Lance you had as your number 3. I'm willing to go there. I think I kind of have Trey Lance and Mac Jones very, very close, and it's just a question of which team they're going to. So
I'm going to retract that. You said something, and I feel like that's kind of what influenced me, because I had Lance and Mac Jones kind of there. But from the very beginning, I feel like this. I've been big on Mac Jones. I think I'm going to move Jones to 3. The only reason I can honestly say I had Lance at 3 is because pretty much everything I'm seeing, every other scout, they've got Lance at 3, or they've got Lance at 4, and they've got Jones at either 5 or 4. But I like –
be your own man, Jude. Be your own man.
Yeah. Sometimes you get influenced. It happens.
Sure.
I definitely like Jones better than I do like Lance, especially considering Lance only played 1 game in 2020.
Well, but here's the problem. It's him playing the game in 2020 made his draft stock go down. His game that he played.
He had a great 2019.
His 2019 was like
almost 30 touchdowns and no interceptions.
Yeah, it was like throwing a perfect game. In your first year starting as as a college quarterback, right? Good, great team to play for, great system, but he executed perfectly, and apparently is a preparation freak with the notes and so on and so forth. Tons of talent, right? But the reason that a lot of NFL people like it's the Bill Parcells model. They don't like anybody who's only started 1 year or had success on only 1 year, because they like to see how teams adjust to you, and they try to figure out how you will adjust when things don't go as well for you, and so on. So
it's the truth.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's incredibly talented.
Jinx is a true thing. Like, a lot of times you see players come in and they light the league on fire, and then all of a sudden there's enough game film on you, and you're just not able to do the same things that you were doing a couple weeks ago.
So all I'd say is Mac Jones is a similar boat. He's really only a 1-year guy as well. Yeah. But it feels like the stuff that he's good at, like you already know what he's not good at, but the stuff that he's good at, I think, is repeatable at the next level, because he's an anticipatory thrower in the extreme compared to the other 4 guys in this draft. That's his game. His game is he understands where there's an opportunity to make a throw, even if there's a tight window, is if he anticipates he can get the ball there and he can make it work.
I was just thinking, like, he's definitely one of those guys, like you were saying about Lawrence, he doesn't take enough chances. Mac Jones, he definitely has made those throws where it's like, you probably shouldn't have, but
he threw some tight balls in the championship game. I mean, where a guy's got like this much room at the window is like a mailbox, and he put it in the right spot, so
I'm guessing for him. Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, I just feel like the Trey Lance and Mac Jones, where they are in the rankings is just, like I said, all about the fit for the team that's picking. If you're the New Orleans Saints picking, you are picking Mac Jones 100 times out of 100 over Trey Lance. If you are, the New York Jets, I'm trying to think of a team that is more geared that way, like what Arizona is doing now. Maybe San Francisco would take Trey Lance most of the time in that situation, because it's like, Trey Lance is going to survive his learning curve in the NFL because he can run and he can move around and whatever. Whereas Mac Jones is like, he's made for a team that's already built He doesn't have to wait for his offensive line to get there. He doesn't have to wait for the system and the wide receivers to show they can work. He could step in tomorrow in New Orleans and make them a playoff team, I think.
I mean, he's Mac Jones. I think of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks, he's probably the only one who doesn't have that, second element to his game as far as like being athletic and making plays with his legs. He probably can, but he just didn't do it a lot at Alabama. He didn't need to. These receivers were wide open, and he was willing.
I think my physique would rival Mac Jones. I've seen pictures of him. Like, I'm in pretty good shape compared to Mac Jones, which is not a compliment to him.
Yeah. But as far as him and Lance, I mean, I just like the guy who played in the SEC more. I just like another thing too is like I just like when I'm able to watch a guy. Like I've watched Mac Jones several games with him in Alabama. I don't know how many people can honestly say, yeah, I sat there and I watched North Dakota and I watched Trey Lance and I liked it. I mean, I watched his highlights, but you get a better feel for a player watching a full game as opposed to watching, a couple highlights. Stuff like that. Yeah, the highlights are great, but I want to see how bad are your bad throws. I want to see, what do you do when your team is not doing so well? Are you lifting them? Are you, on the sideline coaching them up? Are you still actively engaged in games where maybe it's gotten away from you a little bit? And that's on me. I need to watch more film on him, but I just got to give the tip of the cap to Mac Jones because from what I've seen, this is a guy who's very involved with the team. He's on the sidelines. They're winning. He's there with his teammates. He seems like a locker room guy, and he's talented as far as, what he can do with his arm. Just haven't seen a lot with him and his legs, but just like you said, I don't think he needs it. Put him in a situation like the Saints and let him be just like Drew Brees was, more of a pure passing quarterback, and he'll be successful. He'll definitely find success in the NFL if that's the route that he takes.
Yeah, I mean, I will say for Trey Lance, like I said, the reason I have them very similarly tiered is he also championship team. He went into a situation where, as a freshman, where they have a standard of excellence in winning that's just not acceptable. Like what they're doing this year is such a huge step down. You realize that it's not just that the program is amazing. It's like they had a great quarterback too. So, like I said, big on preparation, big on the game, he's calling his own protections, which I think out of the 5, he's the only one that was doing that for Trey Lance. So it's not like he's, played Nowheresville with no talent, with no, competition level, because playoffs in the FCS,
definitely
that's real football. I mean, it's not the SEC or the national championship game, but it's pretty good football. There's a lot of pros come out of those playoff teams in the FCS. So anyway, I think the next 2 guys for me are a very similar conversation in that I think they're same kind of tier, and it just depends on what you prefer in quarterbacks. Because, we haven't mentioned a name that I think is a lot higher on some other analysts list with Justin Fields from Ohio State. And the other guy I put in this conversation is Kellen Mond. I think
Come on. Whoa.
I'm not sure that either guy.
That was my sleeper guy there.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I'm not sure that either guy is a real safe bet for a first round draft pick in the NFL.
Depends on who you talk to. At least for Fields, it depends on who you talk to.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, if you really want to build a team where your quarterback running is going to be a big part, like if you're going to have Cam Newton's offense that he had in Carolina, then Fields is your guy because he's a couple inches shorter, but otherwise he's very similar player to me.
Still good size, 263, 220.
Yeah, I'm just saying. So, but Cam Newton is like enormous.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is they're similar in what their level of progression is, what their success in college was, what their game is like. He's like throws a great deep ball and he's a really good runner. Cam Newton, So if you want to build your offense that way, that's going to count on your quarterback to run as being an integral part of your offense and not just something that he does once in a while. I think he could be great. It might actually, with the right, like, in other words, if there were no Lamar Jackson and the Ravens took him and built an offense around him, I could totally see that working. But the level of commitment of your offense to build around a guy like that is heavy. Go ahead.
I'd say the Lamar Jackson comparison might be a little bit better because Cam is definitely he's going to put his head down and run through somebody because he's just a load. And Fields is more like, try to make you miss an open space. He's not quite trying to, run anybody over. But the real thing for me, too, with Fields is just like it's kind of like what you said with Lawrence and Clemson. You know, this is a guy who played for Ohio State, and that's another team where most of the time they're going to be up by a lot of points, and the quarterback doesn't really have to do much because the receivers are very talented, and you just have to make those open throws. You just got to make those quick throws, and you don't really have to do a lot of reading on the defense. That's my issue with him. I just haven't seen him where it's like, okay, I need to get off of this first read, go to my second read, go through my progressions. It's funny because like I don't want to say I'm knocking him for it, but I'm also knocking him for it. I'm also thinking about past Ohio State quarterbacks who kind of suffered from the same affliction. Like, when's the last time an Ohio State quarterback came out the draft and, you know, they did relatively good in the league? Look at JT Barrett, Braxton Miller, Haskins, Dwayne Haskins. I mean, these are guys, they were great in college. All of them had high levels of success, but the offense is just so different from what they played in college to what they're playing in the NFL. It just doesn't translate well for them, where you need to actually be able to read a defense and anticipate throws, and you can't just expect your receiver to be just wide open every time. At the very least, you can't just throw those jump balls to your receiver every time. So that's why I'm looking at Justin Fields and I'm like, listen, you had a great college career and I loved what you did and you're athletic and you probably will have some degree of success in the NFL, but I just can't put him at a number 2, which is as high as I've seen him go. Can't put him as a number 3. I'd be willing if I'm, you know, the 4th quarterback coming off, but that's probably a team that's like mid to late in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, all it takes is one team to like you, for you to get drafted a round or 2 earlier than you might be, should be.
All it takes is one team to say, you know what, we're gonna make our offense geared to what you do best, right. A la the Ravens and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I feel like it has to be kind of an established team. The guys that are new to their clubs, relatively speaking, don't just suddenly decide to reinvent themselves for a player. That seems rarer. So you see Andy Reid, you see, Jim Harbaugh or John Harbaugh. And that, so for those teams, like they can shift and do something different on demand because they have some cachet with their ownership and whatever. It's not as risky a move, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Like I just don't, like if I had to pick one of the top quarterbacks in this draft that I think is most likely to be a risk of busting, Fields would be it. I mean, Trey Lance is, because he's a single-year starter from small school, he's definitely got some bust potential, and even Zach Wilson bust potential because he's not the biggest dude and level of competition is not the best. But I feel like he's got enough, of that sort of improv talent that it's going to be hard for him to be really bad. I think he could be not as good as you thought he was going to be, but I doubt that he's going to be terrible. Tell me about say again.
Talk about Mondo.
Well, you talk about Mondo. You said it was your sleeper, so tell me why you like him.
Well, let's just really make it clear. Sleeper is like, I'm not saying this is a guy that's gonna step in and be a day one starter, but I feel like this is a guy you might want to explore and see what you have in him. He played SEC football. Again, another bias I have. If you played SEC football, you're playing against the best defensive backs in the country. And he had a lot of success doing that. This is a guy who came in, played as a true freshman at Texas A&M. Put up great numbers, had a little bit of a down year his sophomore year, bounced back. Last year, again, great numbers across the board for him. The only knock that I could really say against him is, he's a little bit undersized. I think he's like right at 200 pounds, but that's not something that's, life or death. He can easily throw on 20 pounds. He's going to need it facing those fast, just as big, monstrous NFL D linemen and linebackers. But again, not something that's, make or break for him. And then just as far as like what we've seen from him from the Senior Bowl, like, another chance for him to compete on a national stage and show what he can do. And he came out a little bit slow, but second half came around and he really picked it up and ends up winning MVP for the game. This is, if you want a project quarterback or, if this is a team, you're going to need a quarterback or you need to develop a quarterback for an aging veteran, I like taking Mond in maybe second round and later. So that way you can stash him and let him learn, let him grow, let him, just enhance his game. And you might end up with like a great quarterback in your back pocket. one of the things you mentioned is just anticipatory throws, and he definitely did that a lot at Texas A&M. You see him in the pocket, and he just has a lot of poise. Like, even though those D linemen may be barreling down and they're right there on him, he doesn't look like he's panicking. He looks like he's just waiting until that last second to make sure it's the best possible throw. That is a great characteristic for him to have. I think if he develops that and he just keeps working and perfecting his game, he might be a really great player.
Yeah, I think there's upside with him, which is why I would have him next on the list. I don't know that he's gonna achieve it, because the way the NFL works, especially now, is once again, you got to go to the right situation where they'll be patient with you and teach you. It's one thing to say, "Oh, come here and sit behind some great quarterback," but if you do that, then they don't really work with you in practice. It's like you're the backup quarterback or third stringer, God forbid. Like, you don't really get much time to develop.
At all, yeah.
You have to just basically get thrown to the fire someday and be great, and then they're like, "Oh, I see, you did it without
we got here.
Yeah, too much preparation, but now we can help you." So anyway, but I think he's got tools. I liken him maybe sort of to like a Byron Leftwich kind of starter, or what was the guy before Leftwich or after Leftwich at Jacksonville who made the playoffs with him a couple times? Also a guy that was very highly thought of, but won couple playoff games for them.
Another black quarterback, David Gerard.
Yeah, David Gerard. So it's like a guy that has, NFL quarterback skills, not a lot of hype coming out of the draft, from college, but that over time developed into actually a pretty solid starter, and transitioned later in his career to be a really good backup quarterback. And I kind of feel like that's Kellen Mond's trajectory. That's the sort of floor for him. And then he has some upside to do better than that. The guy I don't really believe in is Kyle Trask. He would be sort of a guy next on most people's lists, but I just think by the time you get down to Kyle Trask, you're talking about a guy that has no pocket presence, has issues with his brain, tells him he can make throws that his arm is not good enough to deliver at the college level, in his tougher games. When he gets to the NFL, I think that's going to be a bigger issue for him.
Gotcha. Haven't really Trask at number, was that would be number 6 for you or number 7?
Number 6, but a lot of people have Trask above Mond. So that to me is the thing that's a mistake.
Gotcha.
Well, tell me, you've already given me your sleeper. Who do you think is the one the quarterback that you wouldn't draft for your team?
Well, that would have been Fields, but I do have another one. Sam Ehlinger.
Yeah, Sam Ehlinger.
Ehlinger.
He's going to be the star of the XFL the next time it comes around, man. That's the guy he is.
I just feel like he had a lot of hype. I'm not sure why he had
rookie season, much like Bo Nix. Lot of success his freshman year. And I think that set the hopes, he's going to be great someday.
So basically a lot of people were kind of trying to sell him on potential as opposed to the actuality of what he did, is what you're telling me.
He's going to develop he had a really good freshman season. Wow, when he's a junior, he's going to be great. Yeah, it didn't really work out that way.
From the games I've watched of him, he's a fighter. He's scrappy. Doesn't look like a pure passer to me. He is athletic. He makes some plays with his legs, and he's a competitor, all things that you love. But nothing really just jumps out at me as far as like what he can do with his arms, as far as like him breaking down, making those throws that you want to see every quarterback make. He's not projected to go high, so it's not really a guy that.
No, I think he's in that next group of. It gets me back to my original point. Like, I just don't. By the time you get to this point in quarterbacks, why draft these guys? You could pick up a guy as a
draft backups these days, though.
I just mean you could pick up a guy as a free agent or a guy that was someone else's, on someone else's roster last year, and have better luck with that kind of a player. Just as much luck anyway as you would using up a draft pick in the top 100 to draft a guy like Erlinger. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'll give you a very quick sleeper and a super sleeper. The sleeper would be Ian Book from Notre Dame, who I think is like Ehlinger, but better. So to me is the same thing. Limited in every aspect of the game. He's not going to wow anybody with his ability. And I think like if you have him, the problem he'll have is he's not going to be that impressive in camp to give himself a chance to move up the pecking order and get better reps. He's going to be a guy that you put him in a game and he's a gamer. He's the kind of guy I think is, keep your team in a game where they don't, you lost your starting quarterback, or, maybe show something in preseason or whatever. He's the kind of guy that looks and plays better in a game than he does in practice. So as a backup quarterback candidate, I like Ian Book. My super sleeper is Michael Collins, most recently of Rice University. Michael Collins started at Penn, tore up the Ivy League. Not really. He started at Penn and couldn't get out from behind a guy who ended up getting drafted, I think, from Penn. He transferred as a walk-on to TCU. In his first year there, he ended up because of injuries, getting thrust into the game and actually having to start a few games for them. In his first start, he set the TCU, I think, all-time record for passing yards against Kansas. It's against Kansas, so it's like it sort of counts. But he's a big guy. He's 6'5", 220-ish, can move a little bit. He's not going to wow you all the time with his arm, but he has that thing in the pocket that you were talking about earlier where he's not fazed by pocket pressure. Had a terrific year at Rice this year in the very shortened season, 10 touchdowns and 1 interception. So he's a big quarterback, seems to be careful with the football, has a very good track record every place he's been, played in a Power 5 conference. So that's a guy that, as an undrafted free agent, I would gladly bring into my team and see what he's got.
You speak of him, and it kind of reminds me of Felipe Franks.
Mm-hmm.
Big guy, big arm. Not going to give you much running the ball, but he can make a lot of big throws. Played in a Power 5, played in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
He's another guy that played at the Senior Bowl, but he didn't have as good an outing at the Senior Bowl.
No.
But what we saw from him throughout his college career kind of shows you he has a little bit of potential. He could end up being something. Just another one of those guys that's going to be like developmental more than anything. Definitely not going to be able to like come out and start day one or anything like that. But, something happens, you get thrown out there. Who knows? He has the arm power and strength and ability to kind of make some plays happen. So it would be interesting to see.
Sure. I think the Senior Bowl setup in all-star games like that are really for, linemen to one-on-ones against each other, and receivers and defensive backs or linebackers to have one-on-ones against each other, just to see how they stack up against better competition, or the guys that are going to get drafted against each other as a sort of a tiebreaker. Yeah. But I don't think it's a real easy thing to be a quarterback and step into an all-star team with guys you don't really know.
Got no chemistry with them.
Yeah, an offense you don't know or whatever. So I try not to hold too much against them, but Jamie Newman is another name from, and Felipe Franks. Those are guys that just in the all-star game didn't look very good at all, but they also didn't play, like Jamie Newman didn't play football last year. Felipe Franks was in 2 different systems in college. It's like you don't really know that they've maximized their talent, that maybe you could take them somewhere as a developmental guy. It might work for you.
Yes, sir. I think that's all we got for today.
Yeah, usually I have like 5. Let me just tell you about this class. Usually I have like at least 3 or 4 really good sleepers, like small schools or guys that, could or should or be on someone's roster, at least in training camp. But this year, man, because of the COVID situation and guys, anybody that was like that went back to school. So it's a kind of like 4 or 5 guys at the top. And if you don't get one of them, get somebody later as an undrafted free agent, because there's not much out there. That's my take. Anyway, give us a final thought if you got one.
Final thought, if I got one. I didn't prepare for this.
How about the salary cap? Let's finish with that. Good, bad? How do you feel about this 182.5?
Bad, especially for teams who kind of utilized all they had. Well, not all they had, but utilized the higher cap from seasons past. Let's go with like the Kansas City Chiefs. This would be perfect. You give a guy like Patrick Mahomes $50 million a year. That's what, more than 25% of the cap right there. It's going to make it very difficult for you to go out there and sign free agents. It's going to make it difficult for you to keep the pieces that you already have.
Yeah, that's the important thing. Yeah.
I don't know how much money the NFL lost, if they lost any money at all this past year.
They'll never tell. You'll never find out.
It's definitely not a good thing for teams who like to go out and spend money, because now you can't just utilize the same game plan you had before, where it's like, you know what, we're going to sign the guys that we like, and we're going to keep the guys that we like by giving them the money. Right now, you have to really dig deeper and look in the draft to find those cheaper replacements, or even, use free agency to find cheaper replacements for the top dollar guys that you were accustomed to getting.
Yeah, I have a relative who worked on some of the agreements with the NFLPA and the salary cap from the NFLPA side for D. Smith, and she is fond of saying that their book, like I always talk about how the film and television business, the contracts and accounting are so ridiculous, which they are, but she's like, they got nothing on the NFL. The NFL's accounting and the way that they determine how much players are going to make and what the salary cap is going to be, and how public, how transparent they are about it, is like, they don't really tell you anything. Maybe you'll hear a number on a television deal, but they very rarely open the books to anybody. They're not interested. And the NFLPA is not a strong enough union to really demand that, So probably they could have easily, my guess, just from what I know, probably with the wealth of the owners, they could have kept the cap the same and been totally fine with doing that. But it's just sort of like a power move. It's like, we're going to have a season where we don't let a bunch of free agents break the bank. But then there's the Prescott deal, which
40 mil.
Like, I don't know. Like, how is that going to look for Dallas's salary cap the next couple of years? I guess we'll find out.
Right there.
Yep. All right. Well, on that note, our salary cap, we're up to here as well. Like I said, if you like the show and you want to try to help us, please hit the subscribe button. That helps other people find us. Whether you're on YouTube or Spreaker or podcast app or iTunes or Google or anything like that, you can still subscribe and drop us a line, a comment in one of these places. We would love to hear from you about the show, or on Twitter at OSNSFB or on Instagram on the gram, baby.
Yeah.
Or find us on Facebook, where this video airs every week. And that's Jude Allume. He's with 2 E's, Jude Allume. And the Mr. Allume, excuse me, THEE, Mr. ALLUME on Twitter. And I'm Accidental Zen on Twitter. And in the meantime, Wil Masisak, Jude Allume. See you next week on another episode of Old School, New School Football.